everyone. I'm here for another holistic creative chat today with Andrea Schroeder of the Creative Dream Incubator and the Creative Dream Circle. And I'm so excited you are here, Andrea, to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
We have been giggling already. Just a little side note for everyone.
There will be lots of giggling.
Yeah, it's good. Laughter is deep medicine. So, Andrea, we've just been beginning these chats by I'm just going to ask you to share a little bit about your creative making or creative expressive history and possibly your healing process and how those two might be connected in your perspective today.
That's a that's a long question. um, when I was younger, like a teenager, I didn't consider myself creative at all, and I had this sort of secret wish to be creative, but whenever I tried, it didn't work, and it was really frustrating and kind of painful. And I didn't ever take art classes. I did sports when I was little, which in hindsight is really weird because I'm not into sports at all. So when I was in grade 12, I had to figure out what to do to go to university. My parents didn't give me the option of not going. So I picked fashion design, and it was it felt kind of random. My parents were like, what, where did that come from? But I had started sewing some of my own clothes, and I really liked it, and it felt like that would be interesting and fun. And so I had to go away for university. There was only one program with a degree. Um, and it was like this huge creative awakening. It was amazing. So we had to do live model painting and fashion illustration and learning about the elements principles of design. So it was so cool, all of that, learning all of that. And at the same time, we were graded so harshly.
Yeah.
And this was the best design school in the country. And it felt like they always want to maintain that reputation and have everyone be really amazing. And so there was this high dropout rate. Like it felt to us, I don't know if this is true, it felt like they were trying to like push you out if you weren't good enough.
Sure.
And the good enough was always according to someone else's standards. Like sometimes I would make something and be really, really happy with it, and it still wasn't good enough for my teacher. So it was, on the one hand, it was amazing to be learning all this stuff about how to bring my visions to life that I had wanted to do. On the other hand, it really, really killed my creative spirit. I was just sort of being born to be judged so harshly. Um, when I was in my third year of university, my aunt passed away, and she was one of the people that I was closest to, and I had never lost anyone before. So it was a really difficult time, and that was when I started discovering spirituality more. I started going to see a counselor who would talk to me about healing and all of that. I started taking Reiki classes. I became a Reiki teacher. I started taking classes on intuitive development. And I started being more, I guess, more interested in what I was learning about healing and spirituality than fashion.
Sure.
And then fourth year, you do this collection where you're basically working on your own. It's like what a normal person would do it as a thesis. So I had a lot of time on my own to explore. So I could start to bring everything I was learning about healing and spirituality into the fashions I was creating, which I loved. And I ended up going from like barely passing school my first 3 years to graduating in the top 10 because this thing was just like, wow, right?
Yeah.
um, so it felt like this sort of long and winding road teaching me about the intersection of creativity and spirituality. Except then I left university and there's no like career for that. And, I obviously immediately needed money to live on. And so it's been from then another like 15 years of figuring out how to do this as my career. Not that I think you have to, but I just felt called to it, right? And the more that I started doing creativity workshops, and the better it felt like my work was getting, the more I felt really called to give it my full attention.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. What a story. You touched on so many things that just add a richness to this whole process of realizing the intricate relationship between not just creativity and healing, I find, but also spirituality. I mean, that is like the healing salve for me. That's
Yeah.
like the thing that like adheres it all together. And um, in my own personal process, I find too. And then I love how you mentioned, you went through a grieving time as well on multiple levels with your aunt, of course, but also in university, when coming to terms, and I've been there, so I can relate to this a little bit. And for a long time, I didn't see it as grief, but there was this work that I was doing that was very much of my heart, and I would be pleased with it, often because of the process that I would move through with it, and it wasn't always well received in academia. And so there comes this you work with this notion of loss within that container, and then you adjust and you find. But what I love about your story is that still in that container, you moved into this very deliberate, holistic way of healing yourself because of your aunt, and moving toward Reiki and healing with different modalities. And instantly you saw these connections between that and your spirituality and your creative process, and you put it together. And it became this like really organic healing process, even within the university to some degree.
Yeah, it was amazing how, I mean, it felt like my only option at the time. That
Yeah.
like the holistic stuff was the only thing that felt like it was offering me any comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's where I had to go.
So inspiring.
And then, yeah, I mean, I'm just so grateful that it kind of collided with that fourth year time when I had a lot of time to myself where I had to be working on this big project. Right? So I felt like,
Yeah.
I was supported by the circumstances in my life, which I think happens when you make that real, not, well, commitment, but also just like make that choice to move towards your own healing.
Yeah.
Life tends to respond in that way to create opportunities, even though in the moment they often feel more like really horrible things happening. Because I've had a lot of those too.
Absolutely. It requires that we open our perspective to all the things that come our way as teachers and places to grow in. So beautiful. Mm. So you have such an inspiring practice in the way that you inspire people, because you share your process very well. You have a way of articulating your process very well on your site and your blog and in your videos, and I just love that about you. And I think that it's deeply inspiring for people who go back and forth with this notion of, am I an artist? I'm not an artist. Am I creative? I'm not creative. Blah blah blah. And you address that like right away. You say blatantly, I don't art journal. Like you say this is a process that I do. We don't have to call it art journaling. And I just love that about you. And I wonder, was there a what is that about? Is that something that came from a personal thing for you? Like you had to discard that label, or something that you found in the people that you work with, and it became better to choose different language? Because language is so important.
Yeah, language is important, and a lot of the people I work with are they're intimidated by bringing the word art into
Yeah.
art journal.
Yeah.
Also, I find as soon as you're focusing on how it looks on the outside, you've shifted out of your inner process.
Yeah.
And I just found when you are calling it an art journal, and when you've decided like I'm making art, and it's just, I mean, I think art journaling is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I don't even like the way that it's happening in the world. I love it. I totally support it. But it also there's a deeper process available
Mm-hmm.
if you take your focus out of how it looks.
Yeah.
And especially how we're sharing it online is, I mean, all we can do is share pictures, right? So that's why it becomes all the more important to me to share about the process, so that you're not mistaking it for the picture.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the gift of that too, of sharing the process, like in the way that you do, and what I hear as a theme coming up in what you're saying again and again, which is so important, I find as well, is really coming back to this idea that this is this process, the process of being fully in our creativity, and the process of healing is a solitary process. It is inner work. And it's so easy in the noise of our world to get caught up in that external validation piece, or that external exposure, piece and vulnerability piece. But and I find this in my own practice too. It's like I have to keep coming back to reminding myself that this is about my inner work and the purity of my expression. coming through on the page, whether that looks like this or that or that or this, and I think even what I find is that, I went to school for art and creativity and that at one point in my life as well, and had a lot of unschooling that needed to be done there. And I find that
Yeah.
there's a lot of artists too that are hung up on this word of art and art, what it means to be an artist and what it means to make stuff. And they find a lot of great solace in claiming a practice that is more like, dream journaling or visual journaling, as something that becomes nourishment, for their work in the world, whatever that be,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. It can just be so hard. It's like we all have this part of us that wants everything we make to be beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle that I find with, especially when people are new to my classes. And what I teach in the journaling is never about what it looks like. I'm showing them how to work through the inner stuff,
Yeah.
but using the paper, and they're just still like, yeah, but still, I want it to come out pretty, and it's always that wish, right, that it looks different, and actually, I did a lot of work with that with Chris Zidell. I went to go visit her a little while ago, and I got to attend one of her classes, and just that thing about it comes out and you don't like it, and now your work isn't to make it pretty. Your work is to interact with your expression and find out what you don't like.
And why.
It's messy, but it's so powerful to be in that process.
Yeah, it is. It's a relationship. It's a relationship with your creative process. And
because why would you judge, right?
Right, exactly. And I often will say to people I work with too, if anybody that you loved made this piece or was working through their process in this way and was talking to themselves the way that you're talking about your work right now, you would be very upset,
Yeah.
You would want to help them, to choose different language, to be more loving toward themselves, Yeah, so important. And that's the thing I see that you do, that you're so devoted to, and correct my language if you like different language about it, but I find that you, it's a transformation for you. That's what you see as the power of creative process, is that you're really helping people work through their process as a transformative process. And for me, that equates the healing in my sense of what that means, and that's just, I don't know, it's just so good. I'm just so glad you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And that you are devoted to your own practice so deeply. And what we talked about before we hit record, that you have put into place your own accountability ways for yourself, like with sharing your process with your business and your dreams and that too. I mean, that just lends to the integrity, and I think that that's a piece that's super important, and why I'm inviting the people I'm inviting to have these chats is because they're devoted to their process.
One part of my story that I didn't get to was later on in my life, I ended up taking training to be a spiritual teacher. So that was another 4 years of classes and interning, and there was no creativity. But at the center I was at, and I was teaching classes that it was just kind of very dry, very like this is, and it was all about transformation, and I was just stunned at how could you make that boring? It's the most amazing thing in the world. And so that's
make it a curriculum, right?
That's how you do it. And that's when I was doing less of my creativity because it was just taking up so much time to be in that training. And when I started teaching, that's when I started bringing the creativity back in, because this is how you integrate it. This is how you actually get into your own process and make it engaging, because it's boring otherwise. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. The creative piece
hard, right?
It is, yeah.
Facing your stuff is really hard, and so creativity helps to make it easier.
Yeah. It helps us, I feel like it stretches our muscles of how we see things, and that's really one of the biggest gifts of it. It offers up different perspectives into ourselves and the world around us, and then we see ways that we can shift and grow and honor and celebrate and nurture and all of that, whatever it is that we want to be happening or want to feel ultimately. So, what do you find are strong themes in your practice that are coming up at this time or showing up currently for you?
Strong themes. Just in my own personal.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything that's really, you don't have to go into depth if you don't want, because I know how that feels sometimes when you're facing something fresh in your practice.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of coming out of a period of, how do you describe it? Being extremely inner, inner focus. I guess I feel like I was in a cocoon,
Yeah.
and um, and now I'm sort of feeling like the cocoon has broken out, and I'm kind of like blinking in the brightness of the sun, but knowing that the time was right and it's time to kind of step out
Mm.
and kind of grow, and feeling just like I'm just a baby for, and I mean, I look back and I'm like, wow, I've already grown a lot, like as a person in terms of, I really like who I've become. And then
Yeah.
it's kind of surprising to also have this sense that, but I'm just a baby in terms of who I'm becoming next.
Mm-hmm.
There's that kind of thing going on. And then also what I've been exploring a lot is the kind of tug of war between being really happy and grateful about where I am and being really called into something specific in terms of something bigger
Mm.
or better, right? But
Yeah.
but wanting to get there out of really loving what I already have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so pure. Like understanding that it needs to come from that. Like there's something I keep going back to garden metaphors today, all day I have been, but it's like I see that as like a sprout and like needing to feel rooted in what you have and where you are, but still
Yeah.
seeing that light and wanting to reach toward that.
Yeah. I think too often we set an intention, because I set an intention to grow my business in a very specific way this year. We set an intention and then we kind of get sometimes a little, or I do, too focused on that thing, and then forgetting, and then it's like also you become very aware of not having it, or how
Yes.
slow it's taking, and it's important to I have to keep reminding myself to pull back and remember how amazing it is right here, and that just gives you so much more fuel for that journey of where you want to get to.
Yeah, gratitude, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's sure like I had this really specific intention for my business this year. I've never done that before. I've always more worked with what's coming my way, and as long as my income is enough for the lifestyle that I want, why would I want more? And that kind of thing. And also just working with I've had this group for the last 2 years. We would do calls at least once a month, and I would work with what they were bringing in terms of creating the material for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all sort of happening in the moment. And now for this year, I've created a schedule for the year, and it was hard for me to decide now. This is what I'm doing all year, right?
Yeah.
So it's a real shift in approach, and I think there's no like right way or wrong way. I think it's just really good to try all sorts of different ways. Especially for me, I need to try the way that I think is kind of wrong. So I didn't like the idea of setting a specific goal. I didn't like the idea of having a set calendar, but it stretches me in new ways to try it.
Yeah. And that's that right there. That is so evident of what is beautiful about your devotion to the creative process. It's understanding that there's this way I like to do it, and this way where I find flow, and I know that, and then there's this other way of doing it, and I know that if I move that way, I'm going to expand my own comfort zones and stretch my muscles and grow. And maybe you get over there and this is a little too far, and you find that your sweet spot's over here. But it's all about
And
being willing to move along that trial. Hmm.
and also remembering that we don't see our own limiting beliefs, and we're tangled in them. And so it's when for me just trying things that are the opposite of what I would do helps me get a better glimpse at where I hold myself back.
Absolutely. I think of those as blind spots, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So, Andrea, how would you define healing today?
um, wow.
Hmm.
It's really, for me, I guess, just alignment with truth.
Mm.
So for me, I use the word transformation for healing because you're transforming whatever is in the way of you being more in alignment with who you really are. So you're not ever changing because who you are is always perfect. It's just that you are like in a limiting belief or have a weird blind spot about something. And so it's like shifting that stuff out of the way. And so it's really accessing more the fullness of who you really are.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you, Andrea, for being here with us today to have this chat.
Haley, awesome.
As always, I'll put a link to Andrea's space right below this video. And thank you for being with us. Bye, everybody.